So the Volkswagen ID.3. This is going to be the first electric car that I will have experienced, and it's rather interesting. It's not quite the fastest thing out there, and it's not really meant to be all that fast. It's just meant to be comfortable, easy to drive, and kind of a city car. At least I consider it a city car. So how good is it really in terms of an automotive enthusiast opinion? That's the point of the video today. So I'm going to give some of my thoughts, my impressions of the car, how I feel it drives, how I feel it handles, and certain other interesting aspects I found as someone that's never driven an electric car before. So let's get into it. So the first thing you're presented with is the key, naturally. These keys are really nice. They're not those cheap VW keys from before. It's a solid glass. I'm not sure if it's a glass key, but it feels solid. Glass and metal construction. So the first thing you're presented with when you unlock the car are these oval projections on the ground. I don't know what exactly this symbol or this pattern is supposed to represent. Nevertheless, it's cool to see. As soon as you get into the car, you're presented with simplicity, and I wouldn't call it minimalism. It's just rather basic, the way it seems. I don't particularly like the main display, the driver's display, and the infotainment. That's okay, but it looks like a tablet stuck on top. And yeah, not the biggest fan of the interior design. Since I don't really have much to say about the interior, let's talk about the exterior styling cues and overall shape and design of this car. This is kind of boxy. I like boxy cars, but it's also not exactly sharp at the same time. It's got a few nice lines about it, but it's rather bulbous feeling. At least it's quite wide, and you really do notice that when you're inside the car. The car is obviously designed to optimize range, interior space, certain things that electric cars can have advantages over combustion engine vehicles. You know, the lack of the transmission tunnel, whatnot, and it does free up more space inside. And it literally looks like it was really maximized for space. Just looking at the way the windshield is rigged and the size of the front end of the car, the bonnet doesn't really extend all that much over the front wheels, and the rear as well. Now, the doors are rather large, and it's very comfortable to get in, very comfortable to sit. You have plenty of space. It's absolutely wide. The seating position is actually quite high. Even though this is supposed to be a sort of hatchback, we really do sit at a crossover height. This is my first time experiencing an electric car. It is very, very different, very impressive. I'm sure you've heard that said a number of times, but still, the acceleration is something you will still not be able to anticipate, especially with such low power figures. It really does impress. You don't have to go through changing gears, which is unfortunate because that's what we really like. But that also means that when you plant it, you just push back in your seat with such little power, yet the torque is immense. Quite impressive. In terms of handling, this thing is big, it's heavy. The only problem I have with it in terms of how nimble it is on the road is mainly the width. It's a little bit hard to place where the ends are, particularly from this driving position. You can't really see the end of the bonnet. This windshield is rigged at such a large angle, and the whole thing is quite large. There's parking sensors everywhere, but I don't like relying on that, so that's a bit unnerving. But in sports, in sport mode for steering and driving dynamics, I guess, the steering input is really nice. The weight is fantastic for something like this. I do think that's one of the more impressive things. I haven't actually tried the comfort settings. I'm probably never going to try the comfort settings because I don't want to lighter steering. But the way it is right now, impressive. So this thing is really good on a peaceful drive. As you can listen, there's hardly much noise. Now that's a common factor for all electric vehicles, and I'm not sure that this is particularly silent because it is kind of block shaped, and even though it might have a relatively decent CD value, I still cannot seem to believe that it is the most aerodynamic thing. From the perspective of an automotive enthusiast, I want to hear the noise, I want to hear the clunks, I want to hear the RPM of the engine. It gives me a good indication of speed. Here you really have no perception of speed because it's all the same. The thing is, it's hard to hold the speed in this because I don't like using the cruise control or any of those things. And you really don't know what speed you're doing unless you look at that number there. And it's a large number, but still, you always have to pay attention to it. Silent. Steering input is also great. It's quite sharp. I mean, you'd expect it not to have such a direct ratio, but the ratio is rather good. You can see small inputs really do change the positioning of the car on the road. And the actual turning radius is decent for a car of this size. The car is not really long, but it's just so wide and blocky that it gives you that SUV feel, and I think even the height at which you sit at is very close to a lot of SUVs or mid-size compact crossovers, that sort of thing. So for how big it kind of feels on the inside, because the interior is rather roomy, it does turn reasonably well. And it's quick. If you want to swiftly change lane, you do that. And there you go. That bit's really fun. I've got to see that. It's really fun. Oh yes. Probably should slow down. Yeah. You always see that in car reviews. There's always the camera car, and then the car they're filming just pulls out into the next lane and just floors it. I find that quite impressive. I want to try that. We don't have a camera car, but yeah. It's still quite fun to do in this thing. Because the instantaneous torque, it's always there. Look, it's always there. Any speed, you just plant it. But I guess that gets boring after a while. I mean, if you're not planting it and losing range all the time, it probably, I mean, there's not much driver involvement. Now we're going to brake from 70. The brakes are fantastic. They're really sensitive. I have to be so careful not to plant my face into the steering wheel because of how sensitive these brakes are. You can tell that it's using regen here, but I'd like a bigger display. It's kind of really small to see. So there's a battery range, and I think one of these are the regen and acceleration, but I haven't quite made sense of it yet. It would be interesting if there's a bigger graph, or maybe there's a mode. I'm not sure, I haven't fiddled with any of this. But now we're gonna plant it, so let's go. That's 70. That's just so much fun. Oh. But is it more fun than changing gears by yourself? No. Is it more fun than hearing an engine with more than 4 cylinders, hopefully? Absolutely not. But is it fun as a city car? Sure. And when you're sitting at a light, you're not burning fuel. If there's traffic, you don't really care. Those kind of scenarios are where these electrics, I guess, shine. But yeah, braking again. Really sensitive on the brakes. Really do feel it put you back in your seat. Wow. I mean, I've only done it about 10 times, but so far I can say it doesn't get old. But it does reduce the range a bit. Wow. Handling at these higher speeds, yes, you do start to feel a little bit of that inertia, especially around the turns. So I think this weighs 16, oh, no, I think this weighs 1800 kilos. and for something so small, that's quite a lot. It's quite a lot of weight, and you do feel it at higher speeds around the bends, but in the city you don't feel it, at least if you're on sports settings. And even in terms of braking, the brakes are so good that you don't think this thing is that heavy, but it does feel quite planted on the road. It doesn't want to dart here and there due to the undulations. It really holds. I don't know if that's just because of the weight or whether the suspension architecture is really good to manage all of this, but very, very stable. Let's go. 0 to 80 acceleration on the ID.3. Yeah, it's kind of lost its acceleration over there. Yeah, as I said, 0 to 60 is really where it's at. If you want more, I guess you need to get something more powerful than. After the drive, as with all electric vehicles, plug it in to charge, and something interesting is the charge level. You can really see it on the dash, and that's really fascinating. Subscribe, and I'll see you soon.